Welcome, everyone. Happy to see y'all here today. Just going to give it a few more seconds. Let us know in the chat where y'all are coming from. Hello, hello. All right, Minneapolis. Who else is out there? Tampa Bay representing. Hello, hello. Okay, some Florida peeps. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Okay. All right, y'all, we're gonna get this started, okay? So, again, welcome everyone. I am Megan Claire Chase, and I'm the Breast Cancer Program Director here at SHARE, and I'm so excited to have this program, When Cells Go Rogue and Become Breast Cancer, for you today. So, before the presentation begins, I just want to tell you a little bit about SHARE. We are a national nonprofit that supports, educates, and empowers anyone who has been diagnosed with women's cancers or people's cancers and provides outreach to the general public about the signs and symptoms, because no one should have to face breast, ovarian, uterine, cervical, or metastatic breast cancer alone. For more information about upcoming webinars, support groups, and our helplines, please visit our website at sharecancersupport.org. Now, we just have a few housekeeping reminders for you. All participants will be muted during the presentation, so once Dr. Whalen finishes presenting, we'll begin the Q&A discussion. So feel free to ask any questions through the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen. And please remember, Dr. Whalen is unable to give specific medical advice, so please keep your questions general in nature. And we also have closed captioning available. You can enable this feature by clicking the live transcript button on the bottom of the screen and selecting the subtitle option. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll share this recording in a few weeks to all those who registered, and we'll add it to our website under the breast cancer videos and past webinars section. So now, everyone, we'd love to hand over the screen to our amazing presenter, Dr. Diva Whalen. The screen is yours.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am extremely excited to be here today. I met Megan Claire Chase in September, and her energy and just her enthusiasm about education, especially breast cancer education, is amazing, right? And so I am Dr. Diva Melvin. I just recently got married. It's a little name change there. But I am from Clinton, Mississippi. So I think everybody knows where Jackson, Mississippi is. Clinton is just a little old suburb outside. I grew up in Clinton, Mississippi. Then I attended Tougaloo College and earned a biology degree. After Tougaloo College, I went on and got my Ph.D. at Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. And I studied biochemistry and cancer biology. Now, my subspecialty is triple negative breast cancer. Before triple negative breast cancer research, I didn't know anything about triple negative breast cancer, like many of us, right? So I was immersed in learning about triple negative breast cancer for 6 years. And then after graduation, I actually returned back to my alma mater, Tougaloo College, where I am now an assistant professor of biology and a pre-health advisor here, trying to make sure that all of our little eaglets end up in dentistry or research or medicine, wherever they feel like they need to go, right? And I am of the mindset that knowledge is power. And I know all teachers are like that, but I am especially like that because even when we are talking about breast cancer, even if I'm talking about biochemistry, I want everyone to walk away a little bit more knowledgeable, right? And I want them to understand that they can empower themselves just with a little bit of knowledge. And in my spare time, I spend time with my husband and my family. My family lives very close by, so I'm appreciative of that. I walk and run on the Natchez trays, do more walking than running. I'm trying to work my way up to the running part. And I love true crime podcasts. So Dateline and 2020 and all that. Yeah, that is just my little, thing. So with that being said, I am going to start our presentation. Uh-oh. And I hope that you all enjoy. And please, because I love feedback so much and because I am a teacher, you all can go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A section. And see, all right, from the beginning. And if any questions come up, I promise you, I tell everyone there is no dumb question, right? The only dumb questions are the ones that are left in our brains, right? Because I feel like with our power together, we can all figure it out, all right? So let's get started. When cells go rogue and become breast cancer. So I am a scientist by training. And so what I'm going to talk about today is going to be some pathways, maybe some terms that you have heard about, and you're kind of like, oh, I know the theory, but I want the practicality, right? So hopefully I'm able to break down some of these some of these theoretical terms that we imagine, right? And truly make them practical. And so normally our cells are individual living organisms on their own. They just all work together as a whole to create our body. And so just like we engage with our environment every single day, our cells are engaging with their environment every single day as well. They're releasing waste, they're bringing in food, they're talking to one another, they are in constant communication with their outside, and based on their environment, they change and shift, right? Whether to grow, whether to divide, whether to stay the same. And so the thing that cancer cells do, they kind of over communicate or they don't communicate at all, right? And so what we see with cancer cells is either an abundance of communication signals or we don't see them at all. And so it is the job of our oncologists and of our researchers to truly figure out, okay, what communication is going on with these cells, right? What is being over communicated? What is not being communicated at all? And how can we target these communication signals to make sure that we, number one, kill the breast cancer cells and also don't impact our healthy cells that are constantly living around these cancer cells. And so I just want to briefly share with you how I met Megan Claire. I am a grant awardee recipient of Gilead, just like Megan Claire's SHARE program is. And we are doing research in the state of Mississippi, and we are targeting people who are of African American descent or Black descent, and we're just simply trying to educate them on triple negative breast cancer. A lot of people understand or have some idea about what breast cancer is, but a lot of folks don't realize that, hey, it's triple negative breast cancer that is the most dangerous, that is the most harmful, right? And so again, this idea of power is not, or knowledge is power, is what we're trying to disseminate. So I am at Tougaloo College, but we are in partnership with two great organizations, Delta Health Partners, as well as the University of Mississippi Medical Center, who has right now our only cancer research institute in the state of Mississippi. And so with that being said, we just want to shout all of this information from the rooftops as much as possible so that individuals walk away with more knowledge than they had before. The idea is to take care of yourself and to take care of yourself well. And so, with that being said, the reason why we decided to apply is because this graph right here kind of gets under my skin as a scientist. So, number one, yes, it's our breast cancer incidence and mortality rate. And of course, we want those numbers lower in the state of Mississippi. But also another problem that we have in the state of Mississippi, if you all can see, that this demographic is from 2005 to 2010. And so we do not currently have any updated information about the 13 years that have been transpired beyond that. And still, just like in the nation, Black women are number one, they lead in the incidence and mortality rate of breast cancer. And so, with that being said, the question is why, right? We're all trying to answer that question. And another point about this graph, and I'll move on before I get on my little, soapbox, is that we have Black, we have white, and then we have all races. But the question is, what are all those races, right? In the state of Mississippi, we are nuanced just like every other part of the country. And therefore, again, we need to bring more light to the problem that exists right here in this graph. And so I am just going to just orientate you just very generally about some statistics and definitions that I'm going to be using today. So first, what is breast tissue? Well, the breast tissue is made up of several different components. You have the lobules, and then those lobules actually, those are the place where milk is actually stored, especially if a woman is breastfeeding. Those lobules will fill with milk. And then after those lobules fill with milk, they'll exit out of the ducts and into the areola and nipple. And therefore, the infant is feeding from the mother, right? And so yes, it is made of ducts and it's made up of lobules, but it's also made up of stroma, right? And this is the tissue that surrounds the ducts and the lobules, kind of like a cushion. And then behind it we have our muscle, right? Our pectoral muscles. And after that we have our rib cage, and we also have our lymph nodes. And as we can see here, we often test for lymph nodes right under our underarm. If they're swollen, then, do we have a cold, things of that nature. So our lymph nodes are everywhere in our body. And the closest ones to our breast are going to be underneath that underarm. Now, breast cancer is the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in women, and female breast cancer represents about 15% of all new cancer cases in the United States. So just as in 2016, all the way up until now, approximately 250,000 people are diagnosed with invasive breast cancer, and about 40,000 deaths are related to breast cancer. As we continue, the basic definition of breast cancer is just simply the abnormal growth in breast tissue. And again, you can have it occur in your lobules, you can have it in the ducts, but you have, number one, a localized breast cancer lesion, which simply means that the breast cells that are abnormal and that are cancerous are centralized in one location. And then you also have metastatic cancer. Now, because of the orientation of the breast and where they're actually located, there are three main places for metastatic breast cancer. And of course, there can be other locations as well. But the first places those cells escape to are going to be, number one, the lymph nodes, because we saw earlier how close they are. Number two, the bone, because as you can see right here, that the ribs are literally right behind the muscle. And also the brain. And that again is because of the location of breast as it relates to the brain. Now, we have identification markers that many of you have probably already heard about when it comes to looking for breast cancer. You have the estrogen receptor, the progesterone receptor, as well as the human epidermal receptor 2. Now, when we are looking for these types of receptors, we are trying to see, okay, what treatment can we actually treat this breast cancer tissue with, right? Because often we know that these receptors are the targets, and therefore a lot of our drugs are made specifically for the estrogen receptor, the progesterone receptor, and the HER2 receptor. And so that is what we call targeted therapy. And you also have chemotherapy, right? Chemotherapy is very general. It's going to attack any proliferating cell. So just because you have cancer doesn't mean that your other body parts are not constantly dividing and growing, because that's just a normal cycle of a cell's life. A cell is not going to live forever, right? So, like our blood cells, for instance, they live about a 48-hour life cycle. And so, when you have chemotherapy, you are impacting all of those cells that are dividing. And so when we look at the incidents around the nation, so I showed you Mississippi, but now I want to look at the incidents around the nation. We see that non-Hispanic white women are leading in incidence rates or being diagnosed, and non-Hispanic Black women are the second leading. But when we look at the breast cancer death rates, we see that it's actually non-Hispanic Black women that are actually dying from breast cancer more than any other race or ethnicity. And so at this moment, I know that I probably have given us very general, okay, I know this, Dr. Melvin, where's the new information facts, right? But I want to take the time out right now to pause and recognize that these numbers are simply not numbers, right? These numbers are persons, they have names, they have lives, they have purpose, right? And that is the reason why we do this work, because every single incident, every single number that contributes to the incident, they are a mother, a friend, a daughter, right? And they have so many roles beyond being breast cancer patients. And so, with that being said, I do want to honor the fact that there are so many women who just are entering into clinical trials and are living their everyday life still dealing with breast cancer. And I want you to understand and know that just like Cher, you have somebody in Mississippi that is really fighting to make sure that these numbers, we understand that they're humans and we understand their relevance. And so now we come to the little facts, right? We get into the nitty gritty of things. And so I first want to orientate us to our hormone levels. Often we know about hormones, we know about estrogen, we know about progesterone, we know about testosterone. But how many of us really knew that estrogen, progesterone, and the male hormone testosterone is inside of our bodies regulating activities every single day? And so we need these three components to actually vacillate every single day, every single week, in order for natural processes to occur. And so some of those natural processes that females have are menstrual cycles. And everyone, now we have so many apps that can track our menstrual cycles and things of that nature. But our menstrual cycle has an ebb and flow of the estrogen and progesterone, as well as testosterone, in order for ovulation to occur, in order for the release of the egg, and also menstruation. And so all of these, again, are super necessary just for monthly cycles to actually occur. And we also know that pregnancy and breastfeeding can also influence how much of these hormones we actually have in our bodies. And so estrogen and progesterone, they spike when we are pregnant and when we are breastfeeding. And also, a thyroid organ imbalance can also play a role in female hormone cycles. And so oftentimes when people have trouble losing weight or things of that nature, they often try to check the thyroid, right? And that is because the thyroid actually releases a lot of our hormones, right? So a lot of those key regulators, whether it's a hormone that actually regulates insulin or sugar or how we metabolize things, can be found in the hormone, in the thyroid or in the pituitary gland inside of our brain. And so when we have an imbalance in that regulation, that often causes trouble with our other hormone cycles as well. And then we have menopause. Now, menopause is the time where estrogen and progesterone, they taper off, and they taper off just as low as testosterone does. And therefore, we don't have these menstrual cycles that have been monthly or regular in previous years. And so when menopause occurs, we have a decrease in testosterone and progesterone. And also, stress plays a role in changing our hormones daily. If anybody has ever been stressed out and got a stress pimple, that is hormones, okay? And so, again, our body reacts to the stress of buying a house or, welcoming in a new family member or whatever you may have. Our hormones vacillate because of that as well. And also living in lifestyle environment. So what are we intaking in our body every day, right? What are we putting in our body that allows us to have and live a healthier lifestyle? Are we working out? Are we exercising? Are we getting out in nature and just letting the sun kiss us, right? So that is the real question. What are we doing in order for our hormones to either be regulated or our hormones to kind of go crazy, right? So a lot of fast food or, sedentary lifestyles, they don't promote the healthy and normal changes of our hormones every day. And so that's why it is highly encouraged to keep our stress low, to drink water, get those fruits and vegetables and 30 minutes of exercise in, simply because we are trying to regulate our hormones. And so our estrogen and progesterone receptor are actually inside of our cells. Oftentimes when they talk about receptors, especially in the medical field, they say, oh, these receptors are actually on the plasma membrane. And while some of them can be on the plasma membrane, some of them are actually inside the cell, like the estrogen and the progesterone receptor. Now, when estrogen binds or progesterone binds, it allows for DNA to actually be transcribed, which means simply is going to change it to mRNA, and then mRNA will be changed into protein, and then protein simply is just the expression of our DNA, right? So even our curly hair is an expression of what our DNA holds. And so hormone changes are needed because female bodies are preparing for sperm and egg union monthly for about 40 to 50 years, right? So those monthly cycles are just saying, okay, are we going to have a union of the sperm and the egg this month, right? And then eventually we have menopause. Now, a lot of the times, and I want to take a pause while we're laying the foundation of breast cancer, a lot of these hormones are also looked at with ovarian cancer, right? And other female associated cancers. And that's because these receptors are driving those tissues as well. And so when a person says, hey, do you have a lineage of any type of cancer, and they say, okay, what about ovarian cancer and things of that nature, it's because if those hormones and those receptors are being dysregulated in another type of female related cancer, it might be the problem that is occurring with a particular person's type of breast cancer. And so each cell has a marker or identifier on its surface, inside and outside, that lets us know what kind of cell it is. So previously I showed you that we had estrogen and progesterone inside the cell. We also have HER2. Those are going to be markers of breast cancer or breast cells. And so scientists, we look at these receptors or pathways to actually identify what kind of cell it is. And so here you see that I have a house, right? All of us have a numerical value that's assigned to our house. Here we have 3025. So let's just say this is Sesame Street 3025. And so if I was the post mail officer, I would deliver all the mail that has 3025 to this location, right? I would not deliver it to 3026 or 3028, especially if the identifying marker tells me, hey, this is the house that you need to deliver this information to. Also, if you ever gave someone your address, right, and they say, "Oh, well, I'm looking for your address," and you're like, "Okay, just look for the yellow flowers on the outside, or look for the big magnolia tree," right? Those are identifiers that orientate people exactly to your house. And so, oncologists and scientists, we do the same thing. We are looking for those outside markers or inside markers that tell me, okay, this is a breast cancer cell. And so often, again, we look at the estrogen receptor, the progesterone receptor, the human epidermal receptor 2, and the epidermal growth factor in order for us to identify what type of cancer we're actually looking at and what type of cells we are dealing with. And so I say all that to say that I want to describe and break down our different subtypes of breast cancer. Number one, you have what we call luminal A. Now, when you see HR, that is going to be positive for the estrogen and the progesterone receptor. And so it is positive for the estrogen and the progesterone receptor, but negative for the HER2 receptor. Now, this represents about 73% of all breast cancers, and it has the best prognosis because we have drugs that target the estrogen and the progesterone receptor. And so again, we always want these targeted treatments because we don't want to target healthy cells that are not cancerous and they're just trying to divide all by themselves. Then we have luminal B. Now, luminal B is positive for the estrogen receptor, the progesterone receptor, as well as the HER2 receptor. Again, it has a great prognosis because there are targets for it, and it represents about 10% of all breast cancer cases. And then you have the HER2 enriched breast cancer subtype. It is positive for the HER protein or the HER2 protein. It represents about 5% of all breast cancer cases. And it does have a receptor, which means that there are treatments that target it. But HER2, it is kind of icky because it can combine with a lot of other receptors that kind of make it a little bit more difficult to treat. And then we have triple negative breast cancer, or it is absent of the estrogen receptor, the progesterone receptor, and the HER2 receptor. It is the worst prognosis. The reason why it's the worst prognosis is because let's liken it back to our simile that we were building with our houses, right? It's as if all of the houses on the same street are all white. They have the same curtains on the inside. They have the same number of windows. They have the same walkways. They have the same cars that are parked outside of it, right? It's blank. It has no identifiers, right? And if we don't have any identifiers, then that becomes a problem because now we have to treat with chemotherapy. And again, chemotherapy, although it is a method of treatment, it's not the best treatment because we don't fully attack the cells that are specific to that breast cancer. And so doctors prescribe treatment options and aggressiveness based on location. So is it localized, is it regional, or is it metastatic? Also, the markers present on the inside and outside of the cell, as well as aggressiveness. So your treatment options are going to be driven by these three markers. Do I have the estrogen receptor present? How aggressive is it? Is it G1, G2, G3? And the location. Again, is it central to the breast tissue? Can I get a mastectomy? What are my options for treatment? And so again, general chemotherapy is going to target all dividing cells. So it's just like if somebody were delivering a newspaper to all of these houses, right? The newspaper is not going to be custom to house A or house B or only look at the funnies for the little kid in house E, right? It's going to target everything. The newspaper is going to be very general versus our targeted chemotherapy that targets exact cells with exact markers. And so it is personalized, and oftentimes we call that personalized medicine. And so when we are actually looking at the survival rate of breast cancer as it relates to the subtypes, we see if we're going straight across, luminal A is 100% survivable in the 5-year survivability rate. If it's regional, so it's not in the breast tissue per se, but it's a little bit outside of the bounds, and it's 90%. And then distance or metastatic cancer is going to be reduced to 20 or 32%. And then you have triple negative breast cancer. Again, if it's localized, it's going to be survivable by 91%. But as we get further and further away from the breast tissue, our numbers reduce as well. And we see this same thing with luminal B as well as HER2 enriched. And so what this tells us is that if we can identify it early, if we can target it early, even if it's regional, then we have more of a chance to actually treat and have a 5-year survival rate with all of my subtypes, even with chemotherapy. And so it's this distance treatment, it's this distance subtypes, right? With all of the cancers, that is a little worrying, because if we are distant, then we don't necessarily have the same markers. If the cells are distant, then they're adopting new types of markers that assimilate to wherever they are at that moment, right? Because still, these cancerous cells still need to eat, still need to communicate, still need to engage with their environment. So they don't look like the localized cancers anymore, right? They look very different, and they look very similar, or they don't have any type of markers at all to the environment that they're in. They're just plain survival of the fittest. And so again, we return back to our image that we showed earlier. A normal cell, my apologies, is going to communicate with its environment. Yes, it's going to have the presence of receptors. However, its communications are streamlined. It has a purpose. Okay, I'm a breast tissue cell, and I'm working as it relates to a breast tissue cell function. But when we have a abnormal cancerous cell, then we have over communication, right? What am I trying to communicate? Am I trying to communicate with other breast cells? Am I trying to grow faster, grow bigger than the other breast cells that are around me? Or have I migrated to the lymph nodes, and now I need to have and produce another receptor that can actually communicate in that environment? And so there are a lot of different things that play into what type of cancerous cell we have, right? What type of cell goes rogue. But what we do know is that even after chemotherapy, sometimes these cells, they come back with a vengeance, right? And they have a new round of treatment options for you. And that is because what happens is that this cancerous cells, after the treatment, it has adapted to the treatment. So it's built up its walls, its defenses. So whether that is DNA mutation that allows it to circumvent being killed, whether it's taking in certain harmful chemicals so it can be a barrier or not reacting to the chemicals that are already present in the body, such as chemotherapy. Some cells become resistant to radiation, and also stress can induce the treatment options and survivability of cancer as well. And so, yes, we have all of these factors that can allow a cell to go rogue, but even after treatment, if the cancer comes back, it often doesn't look like what was before because it has guarded itself and protected itself or moved location that these chemicals that we've been putting in our body and radiation that has treated it has no effect. And so that's why there are so many treatment options, right? We have, of course, our general, our traditional therapy. And our traditional chemotherapy, again, is going to be very general and can attack any type of growing cell. And you have antibody drug targets that kind of merge into targeted therapy because an antibody is kind of like that post office worker that recognizes a type of receptor and is going straight to it. Then you have our targeted therapy, mostly MAB. So any drug that has MAB at the end of it, again, think of it as our post office worker that recognizes a receptor and is actually attacking that receptor and saying, hey, all right, I'm occupying this space right now. And it becomes like a live-in post office worker, like, no, nothing else is coming in, nothing else is coming out. Also, small molecules and tyrosine kinase inhibitors. Again, these are just targeting exact molecules inside of the actual cell. And then you have hormone therapy. Again, I share with us that hormones can influence, right, the activity of the cell, and therefore hormone therapy might be an option. Radiosides simply are a form of targeted therapy, and they are exploratory, but they do bind to a specific molecule or location. And then you have immunotherapy, which is immune checkpoint inhibitors. And that's because sometimes our immune cells aren't working to help fight off the cancer, right? And so those cancer cells or those white blood cells need to be regulated as well. And so how immune cells actually help cancer cells is you have the cancerous cell, and immune cell says, hey, something is wrong, right? This is out of sorts. And what occurs is a cancer cells then sends out an alarm and brings in regulatory T cells, B cells, and all of these tumor antigen that kind of destroys and attacks the tumor cells at any cost because it recognizes that this cell isn't supposed to be doing, isn't supposed to be here, and it's not doing its job. And so what I want to leave us with is that breast cancer impacts breast tissue and potentially regional and distant areas. Metastatic breast cancer most often occurs in bone, brain, and lymph nodes, which are the closest to the breast tissue. Doctors asked about other types of female-related cancers because hormones can drive breast and ovarian cancer. Doctors identify markers of the cell to prescribe treatment options, and metastatic cancer evades previous treatments because the cells learn how to adapt. Current therapies are vast and can be explored to actually address what type of grade and type and aggressiveness as it relates to a specific type of breast cancer. Thank you all so much for allowing me to share my knowledge with you all. Again, if you all have any questions, I am here and I'm excited to answer them and just engage in conversation. Thank you again.
Oh my goodness. Like, I wish I had had you as a professor or with me in my oncology appointments. We've got a lot of questions for you. So
Okay.
let's get this started.
All right.
All right. So we're always hearing about stress, right? And we're always hearing about like stress and then inflammation in the body. Like, what are some things that we can do to kind of help reduce that stress? Because I know we often hear about movement and exercise and don't be sedentary, but is there anything else that we are able to do for our bodies to reduce that stress, and then also any type of chronic inflammation?
Mhm. So what I can suggest is that the reason why stress is such a point that people kind of pick on is because when our bodies are under stress, they produce these harmful chemicals that actually change pathways, right? And change the expression of receptors. And so the reason why people harp on this idea of like lowering our stress and just and even the stress that we put on our bodies with digesting food is because that stress causes these itty bitty teeny cells in our bodies to react, because at the end of the day, your cells want you to live, right? And so it's going to adapt under any stress. So to answer the question, what can we do? We can eat fruits and vegetables, honestly, and drink water, because number one, water is going to flush everything out, right? And if I was real sciencey, I would let you know that these chemicals, these harmful chemicals that we produce, they have charges, and water can kind of capture that, can kind of capture and regulate and buff that charge. But also, like blueberries can capture those harmful chemicals, right? Those harmful chemicals are called free radicals, and free radicals can be absorbed with vitamin E. So ingesting our regular food and fruits and vegetables and even vitamin E treatment is going to allow for us to block those free radicals that are being released and causing negative impacts on our body.
You bring up such a good point about the whole water and staying hydrated,
Mhm.
because I know many of us who have been through chemo really struggle with that hydration if in post-cancer and survivorship stage, because we had to drink so much water while on chemo
Mm.
to flush
Mhm.
out the poison, right? That
Right,
sometimes
right.
it can be a little triggering, to try and
Mm,
continue
mm,
to drink water because you're
mhm.
reminded of why you
Right.
had to drink so much water before. So can you explain to us, and again, your slides were fantastic,
Okay.
but
Thank
can you kind of give us some more definition or expand upon what you mean by like the distant or regional versus localized? Can you just kind of
Mhm.
break those down again for us?
Yes, ma'am. And so I'll start with here. So when we talk about localized cancer, then it is going to occur in the breast tissue. So those lobules, those ducts or stroma, right? So if it's there, then it is called localized. Now, when we talk about regional, then that means it has moved outside the tissue, and maybe it is gone but has not truly metastasized to all of the lymph nodes, right? And then when we have distant, that's metastatic. It's no longer found in the breast, right? It's found in a different location. And again, some of those locations could be the bone or the brain or somewhere else inside the body. It does not have to stay in those three metastatic places.
Okay. Okay. Oh, let's see. Um, what is recommended? Let's see. What is recommended to keep like the estrogen and progesterone positive receptors at bay without hormone meds? Because a lot there seemed to be a lot of us that had hormone driven cancers,
Yes.
and so what can we do, if maybe we can't tolerate the post treatment medications, but we really need to make sure that we're keeping our hormone levels down?
Mhm.
What can we do to kind of keep those down? I guess maybe naturally. Is there a way
Yeah.
to do that?
Well, I think the only, and this is a limitation of mine, but from what I do know, is that staying active actually starts to vacillate those hormones, right? So yes, your hormones are needed in your, I guess, female organ systems, but also you have estrogen and progesterone everywhere, right? And so if you are being active and constantly, increasing your activity rate, then your body does its job of regulation. Now, the issue is that sometimes, that imbalance is there. But again, if you are staying active, and I think maybe if you go to a dietitian to truly see, okay, hey, like what kind of diet should I be setting up to stabilize these hormones, right? Because people often say, and I can't fact check this, but I can say that, sometimes there are some types of food that actually drives different types of hormone production, right? And so again, I think that might be a very personalized goal. Let's say, okay, so my body doesn't react to this very well, right? And therefore, let me try to incorporate more fruits, more vegetables, playing around with your diet to truly try to help regulate yourself. But I think more of a dietitian or a nutrition can help explore those options.
Fantastic. Let's see. Can you explain what luminol B is again?
Yes. So let's go all the way. So luminal B is the second most common subtype of breast cancer, and it is HR positive, which means there is the presence of the estrogen receptor, the presence of the progesterone receptor, and it's positive for the HER2 receptor. So those three receptors that breast oncologists look for, luminal B breast cancer has it.
Okay. Got more, so look out. Just trying to like combine some here.
Oh yeah.
See. This is an interesting question. So, as those who wear bras, like, if you're wearing an underwire, can that cause like poor circulation of the lymph nodes, and therefore could that be a contributor to cells going rogue, so to speak?
Yeah, so the idea of bras versus unbroad, right? I think we all feel more comfortable unbroad, but no, the wire actually does not cause an effect. But that's why people say, hey, make sure you're fitted correctly, right? So you're not putting tension on your breast tissue area.
Ooh, that is a really good point. Making sure that that you are fitted correctly, because sometimes it may mean either a bigger cup or a wider band or something.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's see. Oh my goodness. All right, so here's a question for you. So, is it true that we don't really know why cells go rogue and spin off or don't die off naturally and become cancer? Or do we know what actually causes this? Like, because I know you spoke earlier about how sometimes the cells will just be silent and not talk, and some just want to talk and then decide, hey, let's have some friends and mutate. Like, what can we do? Like, is it really preventable for our cells to not become rogue?
So believe it or not, there are cells that are growing inside of your body that are mutated all the time, but then your white blood cells say, hey, this is wrong, and it kills itself, right? The cell killed itself, right? So your body is constantly going through, hey, is this the right cell? Is this type of cell communicating in the correct way? And so it's the issue of when these cancerous cells or when these rogue cells evade that white blood cell checkpoint, right? That they escape past that normal clearance that kind of says, all right, everything's okay. Right. Let's just say somebody snuck something through TSA, right? It's kind of like, yes, the TSA person was there. They were trying to work as hard as they could and they were trying to be as effective, but maybe that person had a bad day, and therefore let something slip by, right? And so our white blood cells, they get old. They have to constantly check and evaluate different environmental situations. And so often when there are cancerous cells that evade those checkpoints, then sometimes you do have white blood cells that are not necessarily doing their job. But is there an exact answer? I don't think so.
It was such a great analogy, though. I loved how you used analogies throughout your presentation to really like break it down. Fantastic. Okay. Okay, let's see if you're able to answer this. Does a high oncotype score indicate that the cancer is more responsive to chemo and more likely to have a recurrence in a distant area of the body or both? Like what do you know what yeah.
So I think that this is a treatment option question, right? So if these oncotargets have treatment options for it, then we're positive, right? We're in a good prognosis because scientists, researchers have developed a actual treatment for that oncotarget. Now, there are some oncotargets like RAS, that's the protein that I study. It has been under study for the last 50 years, and there has not been a successful treatment option that is FDA approved for it, right? And so again, it's just going to be number one, can the oncotarget and does the oncotarget have a treatment, whether that's a clinical trial, whether that's a FDA approved drug that has been long in existence for 10 years or 5 years or whatever. So that's going to be the real key indicator. If your score is high, the question is, are there treatment options for it? And if there are treatment options for it, then you're in a better prognosis than if your score is high and there are no treatment options for those specific oncogenes.
I mean, that really goes to show how every body is different and, really have to get the information on what your body is doing and figuring out what's the right treatment for what's going on in your system. So I want to make sure I get to Leslie's question. So, hey, Leslie out there, does alcohol increase the chance of breast cancer? We often hear, to protect your body, limit the alcohol intake. What does that do?
Right. So this is really interesting because I teach biochemistry and we were just talking about alcohol intake with 21-year-olds. So yes, alcohol is dangerous. It's a poison, actually. We actually metabolize or kind of break down alcohol the same way we do poisons in our body. So yes, it is harmful, but everything in moderation, because guess what? Our body can metabolize them, right? But it's when we are in excess of anything, you all, right? Any type of fried food is excess. That's harmful and more problematic for our bodies to break down. Yes, when we are in excess of alcohol, then we are entering into a problem. But our body can metabolize alcohol, right? That's why they say, hey, a glass of red wine doesn't hurt anybody. And that is true because our bodies under normal functions can do that.
Okay, hold tight. All right, here's a question for you. Is the axillary lymph node involvement considered localized or regional?
All right, so this is where I did not take pathology. So I honestly, if someone, let's see, I'm trying to go back in the slide so I can show you. Lord. don't know why my thing is frozen. Hold on, I'm gonna stop sharing, then I'm gonna share again.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, sorry about that, you all.
No
Please
problem.
be patient with me. Okay, now we're back. Auxiliary. So yeah, I didn't do so great in pathology or anatomy. Actually, I didn't take either one of them because I did not want to be an actual medical doctor. But the auxiliary lymph node. What's the question again? My apologies.
Sure, sure. So is the auxiliary lymph node involvement considered localized or regional?
It's regional. It's regional. And the only reason why I say that is because localized means breast tissue. And then regional means those outside tissue organs, such as the lymph node, but it
Okay,
is regional.
it is regional. Okay, okay. Oh, listen to this. Okay. What is the connection between obesity and breast cancer? And just to let y'all know, we actually do have a program about that in another few months about obesity and breast cancer. So look for that. But can you kind of walk us through what that connection is? Because if we're being told, got to reduce your stress level, you know, make sure that you're exercising. But what about if you already have, you know, comorbidities and you're, you know, and then you get cancer? Was that part of the cause of being
Right.
obese?
Right. So, obesity and breast cancer or cancer in general are related because obesity can impact the way that our cells have their normal function, right? And so it puts stress on the body as far as carrying the weight or actually metabolizing and breaking down that fat. Our body loves to break down. And again, I guess you all should just take my biochemistry course. Just come on to Mississippi because we just finished talking about lipids and fats. But lipids are amazing because they give us so much energy, like if we're breaking it down. But if we're not breaking down that fat, if we're not actually metabolizing those lipids, then the problem is storage, right? And we store our fat in adipocytes or fat cells. And those fat cells, they have functions just like other cells do, right? But their main function is just to store fat. So again, if you have more cells that can store fat that is not necessarily easily or the most readily broken down, then there is room for cancer to occur, right? So we want healthy cells and we want cells that are going to be beneficial to our whole system more so than cells that are just there for storage, right? Now, let me share this is that everybody's body metabolizes and needs different things, right? And so this idea of being obese, we have to make sure that we are in the healthiest bodies that we can possibly be in, right? I know some people that can that are kind of bigger, but they can outrun, you know, a skinny bitty person, right? And it's because they are healthier, right? So my thing is, you know, people, if you look at me, they say, oh, and I don't mind sharing this, oh, you're 155 pounds, you're obese for a 5'3" person. But I'm healthy, right? And so this idea of like, hey, are you healthy for your body type is going to be essential. Now, I'm not giving anybody a pass not to work out, right? But I am saying that we need to be aware of what our body needs and desires because, you know, we can't go on a keto diet. You know, because a keto diet, after you finish your diet, just gonna the pounds are just gonna come right back. Right. So you need a lifestyle change that is a healthy lifestyle change for you.
I really love what you said about what is healthy for your body, you know, because often we see those impossible standards, you know, and a lot of times I'm like, I don't think you're accounting for like muscle, you know, and that's like ideal weight, you know, that you're trying to tell us. So yeah, we got to make sure that we're the healthiest for our particular body, however that may look,
Yes.
right? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Do you have a little bit more time?
Yes, I
You're
have
still getting
time.
flooded with questions. Okay. All right. Let's see. So you mentioned earlier about ovarian cancer. So like if we have the ovaries removed, will that decrease estrogen to 0? Because
No.
I feel a lot with that particular question because I had to have surgically induced menopause, and I had a oophorectomy, so they took everything out. And I think a lot of us may lack, we aren't really clear on what does that mean when you have a hysterectomy, and what does that mean when you have ovaries? What does that do to your estrogen? Are you still producing anything?
You are still producing it, but the rate in which you produce it is lower, right? And so you can think of estrogen. Estrogen needs to bind, it needs to hold to something. And so I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, here it is. I want to show you all the picture. Okay, so we have estrogen right here. The molecule actually binds to the receptor, right? Now, again, these receptors are going to be in places where the female tissues are, right? So if I remove the female tissue, then this has nowhere to go. And then the body says, okay, I need to stop producing as much. And that's what happens. And so your estrogen, your progesterone, all of those hormones that are connected to an actual organ are decreased because it has nowhere, it doesn't have a home anymore, right?
A really good explanation. Really very clear, very clear. Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions, and
Okay.
do not want to take all of your time, but we appreciate you staying on just a little bit longer to answer these. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this one, but let me know. Does high prolactin level cause invasive lobular breast cancer?
Prolactin. I am unsure, but prolactin sounds like a hormone. And if it's anything like testosterone, so this is my context clue. If it's anything like testosterone, then it's regulated by a tissue type, right? And so if you do have high, and I guess I can liken it a little bit. So do I have the exact answer? No, I do apologize. But I can liken it to men who get their PSA tested for prostate cancer, because PSA is a hormone that is directly related to the testes, right? And so if it's really high, that means that there's a problem inside of the testes. And so prolactin, I'm not quite sure. But again, if those levels are measured and associated with some type of tissue type that is gender specific or tissue specific, then there might be a cause for concern.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And okay, everyone, this is going to be our last and final question. And I did see this come in a lot when people were registering, and seeing this question coming over live as well. And why is dense breast tissue a risk factor? Because like seeing your graphics there, like what can you kind of explain, like what does that mean? Like if we're looking at this, what does that mean to have the breast, the dense breast tissue? Because we're constantly seeing, yes, you will get a recording of it, Donna. Yes, you will. What does it, is it a risk factor of having dense breasts?
Well, yes, they do say that it is a risk factor, and it's only because the number of cells that are present, right, inside of the body, inside of the tissue, and there is more opportunity for mistake to happen, right, or for cells to go rogue. And so when people describe this breast tissue as a problem or a cause for concern, it's only because there are more opportunities for breast cancer to occur because there are more cells present.
Got it. Got it. Well, everyone, I cannot thank you enough for joining us here today. Dr. Diva Whalen Melvin, is your?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Really and truly, thank you so much. I mean, the questions were so common. So feel free to reach out to us and ask any additional questions, and we'll make sure that those get to Dr. Whalen Melvin. I'm just hyphenating your name right now. But
Yes,
again,
that's fine.
again, truly, thank you so much for taking the time. This was outstanding and just so digestible, and really appreciate it. So everyone, thank you. Yes, you will get
Thank
a
you.
recording
Thank you.
after in a few weeks. So don't worry, anyone that registered will automatically send you a recording of this. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you and have a great weekend. And again, to our presenter, Dr. Diva Whalen Melvin. Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.